Let's be consistent.
Welcome to the Key to Consistency. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and on today's episode, we are going to be exploring the relationship between consistency and sleep. So when we think about what sleep has to do with us as humans, of course, it is huge. If you were to sleep, a full 8 hours a night, you would effectively be sleeping 1/3 of your life away, which if you're listening to this, you may be like most of us who don't necessarily get a full 8 hours of sleep, but we do understand the importance of getting as much sleep as possible. And so when we think about sleep, the way I want to start off today's conversation is going to really be focusing on the benefits of at least striving to have consistent sleep patterns, right? So when we think about the importance of maintaining consistent sleep habits, it's not just about, okay, I need to get those 8 hours in and that's just going to be it, right? It's really about the quality and making sure that roughly around the same time every day, you're able to get to sleep, right? That's not to say if you sleep at 8:30 one day, the next day you're at 8:31, it's a problem, right? Of course not. It's more about roughly around the same time being able to wind yourself down. It may be after you put the kids to bed and you have some time to yourself and time with your spouse, right? Making sure that you guys have your time as well, but you also prioritize getting good quality sleep as well. One of the amazing benefits of sticking to a regular sleep schedule really has to be your body's internal clock that is otherwise, of course, known as the circadian rhythm of your body. It becomes finely tuned, right? And what happens when your circadian rhythm is in a good space is that really leads to improved sleep efficiency. And that means that we're falling asleep as humans faster and we experience fewer disturbances during the night. So we're able to get quality sleep because our circadian rhythm has picked up on the fact that at this particular moment, we can dive into that deeper level of sleep because we have our circadian rhythms in a finely tuned manner. Right? And again, I get that it's not always feasible to go to sleep roughly around the same time if you have kids, if you work overnight, right? Like there are a lot of factors that go into that. But with the teachings from today's episode, I would at least hope, right, that you could take some information and begin to try to implement where you can building some consistent sleep patterns, right? And so I've kind of mentioned up until this point some of the positive traits about developing a consistent sleep pattern, things like being able to fall asleep and being able to experience fewer disturbances during the night. But outside of that, of course, with every good, there may be a consequence, right? Not necessarily meaning something bad, but a consequence. I look at consequences as just reactions. It's just what it is, right? So if you have more irregular sleep patterns or an irregular sleep schedule, you can look at your body in this lens as a orchestra, right? So if you mess with the conductor's baton, in this case, your circadian rhythm is that conductor's baton, things will go awry very quickly, right? And what does that look like tangibly? That means that your body generally will not be able to perform its best the next day. There are things that you could be experiencing and when you're off. I feel like we all may know, when you don't have a good night's sleep and kind of when you're off the next day. But if this is something that becomes a habit, some of the consequences of an irregular sleep schedule could be things like daytime sleepiness, right? Mood swings, difficulty concentrating, and really the inconsistency at the sleep level really robs you of getting the full restorative power of sleep, right? And that's really one of the main purposes of sleep is to rejuvenate and to restore us to be able to take on the next 24 hours that we have to take on. And so when we think about how your circadian rhythm really impacts the way you wake up and the way you sleep, it's honestly pretty fascinating. I'm not going to lie to you guys. When I was researching this particular piece of today's episode, I found it fascinating, right? So if you've ever kind of wondered, especially if you don't set your alarm clock in the morning and you've ever wondered, like, how does my body know when to get up? Right? Especially if you're like me, like I tend to go to the gym at 4:30 every single morning. And so even on the weekends, when I try my best to stay up late, right, I still end up going to bed relatively early and I still end up getting up around 4:30, 5 o'clock, right? So it's like, how does my body know when it's time to wake up and when it's time to go to sleep, irrespective of the day of the week? Well, that's where those circadian rhythms really come into play. It's a part of our body's built-in clock that really aligns with the natural light-dark schedule. And so when we think about consistent sleep, being consistent with our sleep patterns really reinforces these rhythms that we're trying to build. And it makes it a lot easier for you to wake up feeling refreshed and feeling energized because you've put your body in a cycle to know, okay, this is when we get up. Okay, this is when we go to bed. And it may not necessarily be the light dark schedule that we think about when we see lightness and darkness out in the world, right? Especially if you're someone who works overnight, you may find that you can truly sleep throughout the day, right? But most people who sleep throughout the day because they work overnight will oftentimes have to have blackout curtains with wherever they're sleeping, because when things are light, our body does have a tendency to want to rise because of the light, right? And so if you find that you may be, jet lagged because you travel a lot, or you're someone who works overnight, your circadian rhythm is kind of in flux, right? Which is totally okay. And you know why it's okay? Because when we're thinking about building consistency with our sleep patterns, we recognize that we're not all there, right? Even if you aren't a frequent flyer and even if you don't work overnight, you may just have kids. You may just work a really challenging job. You may be an entrepreneur. Your situation could be very different. But on this episode, we're really going to give you guys practical tips to make sure that you understand the importance of sleep, the importance of your circadian rhythm. You may even be able to educate your friends and loved ones about what a circadian rhythm is, and really making sure that you prioritize your sleep, right? So I'm going to give you guys one mind-blowing fact before we get into the first actionable tip, right? So it's crazy to think that consistent sleep patterns boost your sleep efficiency. So what this means is when you spend more time in those deeper stages of sleep, you are really making strides that are essential to your physical and your mental recovery. So when we think about your improved sleep efficiency, that translates to better cognitive function. So you'll feel more alert, you'll feel more awake, you'll feel more engaged, you'll feel more involved. You have more enhanced memory consolidation. And who in today's day and age could not benefit from more memory consolidation and really sharper decision-making skills, which are crucial in today's day and age. And so if you've been struggling to recall, like, hey, where are my keys? Or, hey, I think I misplaced the remote. Like, those are the things that you can think about and say, you know what? I may need to reevaluate my sleep schedule. Of course, you're not going to think about those things and say, man, I probably could sleep some more. No, but hopefully, today's dialogue is really making you think about your own sleep pattern and how often are you really able to prioritize getting sleep and getting sleep consistently. So the first actionable tip that I really want to give you guys to be able to nail down sleeping on a consistent basis is making sure that you first and foremost establish ideally a fixed bedtime and wake up time. I know fixed is such a interesting term to use because there are a few things in life that are fixed, quote unquote. But this is one of those things that if you really prioritize making sure that even if it's not fixed, even if it's within an hour and a half, 2 hours of the same time, right? That you are prioritizing going to sleep, right? And most oftentimes people can't get to sleep because they just, okay, I'm going to walk in my room and I'm going to go right to sleep. That's not practical and that's not the reality of the situation. We all know that we have to wind down. We have to get ourselves in the right mental space in order for that melatonin to begin to flow and for us to begin to feel like, okay, I am kind of feeling sleepy, right? I would encourage you when you think about your bedtime routine, guys, let's cut out the phones. Let's cut out the blue light. It's really because I think we don't realize that the blue light can mess with your body's melatonin production. And if you know, and you still do it, is one of those things where you have to come to the conclusion, I'm making a conscious decision to do something that I know is not necessarily best for my body, right? And as tough as that may sound, it's just the truth of the matter, right? One of the things that I personally do, I have a TV in my living room, but I do not have a TV in my bedroom. Trying to get in the habit of not even bringing my phone in my bedroom, but because I don't have a separate alarm clock, I use my phone for my alarm in the morning. But I am honestly thinking about just going back to, we may look at now in 2023, we may look at it as archaic, but I am thinking about getting a regular alarm clock that is separate from my phone so I can leave my phone maybe in like a drawer or maybe like a few distances away from me, because I know, like most of us, if my phone is like on the charger next to my bed, like it's going to be in my hand, right? And that's not good. And so thinking of ways that you can really help yourself by establishing that nighttime routine is going to be huge. And in the next part of our episode today, we'll get into some ways that you can really establish your bedtime routine. Today's episode is brought to you by the merch shop at thekeytoconsistency.com. I would encourage you to visit our merch shop to see if there's anything that piques your interest. One of the easiest ways to be consistent is to be visually reminded that you are on a mission. You are going to be consistent. So whether you pick up a phone case or you pick up a t-shirt, we have something for you. Again, that is www.thekeytoconsistency.com. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Awesome, guys. So when we think about winding down and going to bed, before we kind of get into, the best way to establish a bedtime routine, I do want to tell you guys more about the power of a pre-sleep routine or a bedtime routine. So if you can imagine this in your mind, right? You are in a serene oasis. You are in a place where you do not have any worries. You do not have any cares. Your mind begins to wind down and your body begins to signal to itself that it's time to recharge, right? When you begin to prepare and prep for going to bed, that is exactly what happens to your mind and your body. We need to make sure that with these pre-sleep routines, we are developing standard practices that serve as a bridge between the hustle and bustle of work, the hustle and bustle of our day, taking the kids to school, of cooking dinner, and bridging that to a restful sanctuary at night. Right? It's not just about sleep, guys. This particular piece about really creating a mindful transition to a place of calmness, to making sure that when you are shifting to going to sleep, and that's why as much as you can anyway, of course, we're all human, don't go to bed angry. Don't go to bed in a state outside of calmness and peace. On a slight tangent, but still relevant, I was reading the word last week and I came across a verse, I believe it was in Romans, and Paul was advising the church, as much as it depends on you, be at peace with everyone. And I thought that was just such a powerful verse, because when you really think about it in the magnitude of things, like in the grand scheme of things, it's like, why would I really sit there and have beef or have anger with someone else? And that anger, because it is, of course, in us as humans, is going to translate into how we go to bed, right? Especially if you're the kind of person who, when things are unsettled, it weighs on your mind, and it weighs on your mind to the point where you're restless at night. That's really what we're trying to solve for when we think about the power of that pre-sleep routine, the power of, if it's sending a text message apologizing before you go to bed, if it's I say a text message, but ideally phone call, FaceTime, face-to-face interaction, especially if it's with someone in your home that you have the ability to go to them and apologize. You guys can work it out, but trying to make sure that we essentially bridge the hustle and bustle of our everyday lives, and we make sure we transition into the night with a clear mind, calmness of body, and just peace. And it's hard to have that when you have enmity, especially in your home. Outside of creating that nighttime routine, there are things that we like to do at night that aren't necessarily beneficial to us. When I think about some things that I used to do at night that just wasn't necessarily beneficial to me. This was when I was like back in college, and I would be up late, and I wouldn't be up late because I was studying for something or I was working on something. I was just out. And sometimes I would be out and I would be with friends, and I would come back and, I may have school the next day. I may have work the next day. I may have an early morning meeting, because for some years when I was in school, I was a resident assistant. And so just being out with friends. And then I say that now, of course, looking back, and it's just like, how much sleep did you lose? Right. And now it's like, what did you really gain from those experiences that can help you with getting to where you're trying to go? So I say that to say, if you find that you're in a space in your life where you're going out and you're living your life, and again, there is no shame or judgment to that. Do what you believe is best for you, because you should enjoy your life. However, we want to make sure, as stated on a previous podcast episode, that when we think about consistency, it is about making sure we do the small, repetitive tasks every single day that's going to enable us to be the people that we want to be going forward. And when we think about sleep, hopefully you guys have at least picked up until this point, that as small as a pre-sleep routine is, as small as it is to try not to go to bed with your phone in your hand or with the TV on or with anything that may emit blue light. These are small things, but these small things done consistently well over time can lead to those benefits we spoke about earlier when we think about your increased cognitive function, right? When we think about your ability to make better decisions, because now you're focused and you're all the way there, and you're not waking up and you're groggy or you're having a mood swing. And so I know that, sleep isn't necessarily the funnest topic in the world to discuss, but it is a crucial topic when we think about how it impacts us in our lives and really impacts our ability to show up in the world, right? And so some things that I would encourage you to do if you don't know where to start with crafting your own pre-sleep ritual is to think about doing some things like dimming your lights if you have a light switch dimmer in your home, in your room, in your bedroom or not, right? Like maybe you just turn the lights completely off. Make sure that, your phone is tucked away, right? It's tucked away as it can be, settled someplace on the charger, of course, even if that means that rather than putting it right by your bedside on your bedstand, maybe you put it across the room, right? And it may not necessarily be just right there, right? Maybe it's having a humidifier in the room and you put your favorite essential oil in that humidifier. And when it comes to maybe 6 p.m., 7 p.m., you just turn that humidifier on and you go and you take a shower. And when you come back, you have that aroma in the room and you allow that to linger in the air, right? If you're a reader, right, you may read a book. For me, you guys know my favorite book is the Bible. So I'm taking that to bed with me, right? Some of us may like to sip on herbal tea, right? There are things that will help your body unwind, help you take your mind off of the day. And those are the types of things that you want to do when we think about crafting your own routine, right? Think about around what time every single day could you start your wind down routine, right? Could you start dimming those lights, right? Could you maybe tuck the kids in a little earlier, right? Around what time can you begin to get into your pre-sleep ritual, right? Outside of reading and, having some herbal tea, maybe you do some gentle stretching before you lay down in bed, especially if you find that it doesn't matter what you do. But because I work from home, I'm thinking about people who sit down all day and your lower back or your legs could be stiff, right? It may be worth doing some gentle stretching before you go to bed and actually, lay down for the night. But hopefully these ideas are beginning to swirl in your head, right, around what you could do to be able to craft your own pre-sleep routine to really help you have tranquil nights, really help you embrace serenity and peace before going to sleep. I would encourage you, even if you do nothing else, to try your best. And I know I've said it at least 2 times, but I'll say it one more time before we go on to the next portion of our episode today. I would encourage you to unplug your screens before bedtime, at minimum an hour before bedtime, and really just embrace a relaxing activity of your choice, whatever that looks like for you, and really allow your mind to just not think about anything. Not necessarily in a state of meditation if you don't want to just sit and meditate, but even if you are in the shower, just feel the water hit you while you're in the shower. Don't think about, I did this at work today and I have to do this when I get out the shower. Well, listen, you're not at work and you're not out the shower. You're in the shower. So be in the shower, right? Being present and being in the moment, especially during your pre-sleep routine, of course, really in life in general, but especially when you're about to go to sleep, is crucial to make sure that you've given your mind ample time to start its own wind down process. It's not thinking as many thoughts because you're not in the middle of your workday where you have all these decisions to make. You are winding down. And you, to a certain extent, have to treat your body like you treat a child. You have to tell it what it needs to do. And so oftentimes, as we heard with the consistency in TV watching episode, there are times where we don't do what we need to do because our body moves on autopilot. So if you did not listen to that episode, I would encourage you to go back and listen to that episode about consistency in TV watching. And the last thing, guys, that I wanted to walk through with you all was just the power of a sleep sanctuary. And of course, for most of us, that is going to be our bedroom. When we think about our sleep environment, that can really make or break how effective your sleep routine is and how effective your pre-sleep routine is, right? Your sleep sanctuary or your bedroom is really a space that needs to be set up for your worries to fade away, for your mind and for your body to find solace and to find an oasis, right? I already talked about some things that you can do as a part of your pre-sleep routine, things like dimming your lights in your room to help increase melatonin if your bedroom has a dimmer. If it doesn't, I would encourage you to just go ahead and turn the lights off and maybe get like a night light or some other type of light source in the room that you can control, just so you can still have light while you're winding down, but you can begin to slowly wind down and control the temperature in your room. I know you're like, temperature, Rakia, you're talking about a light, but I'm sure you've heard of warm lights and bright lights. Like, it gives you a certain ambiance when the light is turned not to full brightness, but it may be a little dimmer to like that warm feeling. I would encourage you, regardless of if you have an overnight job or you don't, blackout curtains would be your best friend, because blinds will still allow the light to seep in. And we want to make sure that we're creating a place where there is no artificial or even official light sources at all, especially when we are about to signal our body that it is time to go to sleep. Right? When we think about another element of our sleep sanctuary, let's talk about the mattress, the pillows, the bedding. I know that some of us may not necessarily be in a position to get a super luxe mattress, but let me tell you guys, if you slept on a bad mattress, then you know. I don't even have to explain it to you. I don't even need to go into detail. There are certain things, while things can be a bit pricey, there are certain things that you do not need to be cheap with, because there is nothing like consistent back pain because you decided, I'm going to spend more money on my car than I do on my mattress. Right? I'm not going to buy the pillow that I want because I want to buy the foam that I want. Right? There are things that become, if we were to go back to the orchestra example earlier, if your circadian rhythm is the baton, your elements like your mattress and your pillows and your bedding, those are like the instruments that are a part of our sleeping orchestra, right? Making sure that we invest in those things that help revolutionize our sleep quality. There are places, of course, you can go to lay on mattresses and test them out and actually figure out which one is going to be the best for you, which pillow is going to cradle your head just right so you can feel good when you lay your head on your pillow, which mattress is going to align with your sleep preference and with your sleep style, what bedding is going to be soft yet breathable, right? These are some of the elements that when we think about building up your sleep sanctuary could make a ton of difference, right? Another thing that when we think about your sleep sanctuary is noise, right? And of course, if you have kids and you have a spouse and you have a full home, it is not always easy to silence noise, right? But we do want to make sure that we, at least as much as possible, mitigate the impact of noise. We want to strive for a quiet sleep environment. There are certain things that we can't do to minimize background noise, especially if you unfortunately happen to be living in a place that is just maybe the walls are thin or they may be doing construction. Like, it could be a slew of different things that could be going on. I would encourage you to consider investing in a white noise machine or maybe earplugs, just to make sure that you really envelop yourself in your own gentle audio cocoon, if you will, that really lulls yourself to a deep, productive sleep, right? We want to make sure that when we think about our sanctuary, I'm going to paint you guys a picture at this point. So hopefully this will allow you to invest in your sleep sanctuary with this imagery, that you step into your bedroom or your sleep sanctuary and you have the lights dimmed, right? You have the blackout curtains, so there's barely any light coming in. you have the ambiance set and your essential oils are in your humidifier. Your phone is across the room, and now you're standing in your room and you are doing some gentle stretching. You may decide to do a few neck rotations, some arm rotations. You may decide to stretch out your quads or your hamstrings or your lower back before you actually lay down in bed on a mattress that is quality, that is fit to your sleep style and your sleep preference. And then your head hits the pillow that literally cradles your head and you feel at peace and at ease, right? We want to make sure that as a part of our sleep, we invest in an effective sleep sanctuary, right? So hopefully you can take away from today's episode the fact that you may need to make some adjustments in your sleep sanctuary, right? You may need to upgrade your bedding or maybe, employ the white noise machine or the earplugs, right? That is one element of what is powerful in getting effective sleep, right? The next thing that we talked about on today's episode was the importance of a pre-sleep ritual, right? What are you going to do in order to put yourself in a situation where you are doing the same routine roughly around the same time every single day, right? And probably lastly, and most importantly, just on the more knowledge and education piece, we began to understand at the top of today's episode, the importance of the circadian rhythm, right? What it is and the role that it actually plays in us getting effective sleep. So hopefully, as a part of today's episode, you were able to take something away and you were able to learn about what you can do in order to prioritize and get your best sleep. And so, of course, we cannot end a podcast episode without a verse from the book that gives life, and that speaks life, right? Today's verse is going to come from 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19 through 20, where it says, "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body." And this verse was chosen, guys, because it just reminds us that our bodies are sacred and we have a responsibility to take care of them, right? And sleep plays a factor in that. So if we need to put additional time, effort, and energy into just making sure that we craft out our sleep appropriately, then we should do so. So guys, remember that consistency breeds mastery and transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Key to Consistency. Wherever you are listening to this podcast, it would mean everything to me if you could rate it, review it, reach out to me on Instagram. Would love your feedback, would love to hear anything you like, anything you don't like. Please feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit from it. And until next time, bye guys.